Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Greek Mythology, God of Fire and Craftsmen. Chapter 21. Hephaestus didn't quite get used to these looks from people. Withdrawing his gaze, he strode into the gate of the city. The city was full of people, bustling, like a raging fire cooking oil. Above the street, sunshade cloths of various colors are connected one after another, appearing chaotic. There are two drainage channels below, through which all kinds of sewage flow. There was a strong stench. Hephaestus' nasal passages were irritated and he sneezed without warning. At this time, a carriage full of fruits passed by. Hephaestus picked up a gray cloak from the carriage and put it on himself. He didn't want to be watched wherever he went. With the hood on, Hephaestus is finally less conspicuous. The king offers a reward. The king offers a reward. Hephaestus didn't go very far. I saw a group of people galloping from across the street. Many pedestrians hurriedly retreated to the sides, fearing that they would be hit by horses. The leader of this team was a fat middle-aged man, raised a piece of cloth in his hand, and shouted loudly, "The king offers a reward. The king offers a reward." People in this team kept getting off their horses and posted on the list in crowded taverns and streets. And the fat man ran directly to the gate of the city, and posted the biggest list in his hand on the city wall. Many citizens immediately looked around curiously, and after a while, it was crowded. It's a reward offered by the king himself. Look. Whoever can kill the Warcraft Chimera will be rewarded heavily by the king. Beauties, gold coins, official positions. The rewards are too generous. Unfortunately, how can ordinary people kill Chimera, unless it is possible for a legendary hero? The crowd chattered. Hephaestus also looked over curiously. The king of Lycia offered a bounty for the monster Chimera. The monster, then there must be a magic core in the body. Hephaestus stroked his chin. Warcraft Chimera, the legendary child of Typhon and Echidna. It has the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a python. Its breath exhales fire. Wherever it goes, it will be turned into barrenness. It devours both animals and humans, and its fire burns down villages, and no one can stop it. On the reward list, it was because Chimera was a disaster, causing the people of Lycia to suffer heavy losses, so they had to issue a reward to recruit warriors to eradicate the monsters. It's better to come early than coincidentally. Warcraft Chimera, I accept this bounty. Hephaestus held up his hand, and the list posted on the city wall immediately flew over the heads of many citizens and fell into his hand. Many onlookers were shocked by this move. The same is true for the leader, staring at Hephaestus with wide eyes. Everyone stared at Hephaestus in astonishment, and the surroundings quickly fell silent. Which direction is Gelong village mentioned above? Hephaestus rolled up the list and stared at the fat middle-aged man. To the east. The man stammered and pointed in one direction. Okay, wait for my good news. Hephaestus smiled and walked towards the city gate. Many citizens immediately split a channel. When his back disappeared, they cried out in surprise. Oh, did you see it just now? As soon as he waved, the reward list flew into his hand. What's going on here? Isn't he a god? I saw a sword on his back, maybe he is a hero. Feel the weather is very hot and dry. The fat man wiped off the fine beads of sweat on his forehead, his head was still a little dazed. He just saw that the face under the hood that received the reward seemed to be a boy who was only 16 or 17 years old. Although I don't know how the other party managed to fetch objects from a distance, can he really kill a ferocious monster like Chimera? Hephaestus flew all the way to the east. Chimeras have been making waves around the Lycian capital city-state. The last time it was revealed was the village of Gelong in the east. If you follow this direction, you can definitely find it. Half a day passed. Hephaestus passed through several villages, but found no trace of the Chimera. This made him a little puzzled. But he confirmed that he was not going in the wrong direction. It seems that I need to find a village to ask. Hephaestus was thinking. He flew to the top of a mountain, stood on the edge of a cliff, looked down at the ground, and looked for human signs. Suddenly, he saw a village under the mountain being engulfed in flames. Blazing flames dyed a small half of the sky. The villagers, who were as small as ants, fled in all directions crying and screaming like crazy. No matter men, women or children, they were all equally helpless at this moment. The breath of death is spreading here. Chimera. Hephaestus frowned. I saw a huge lion-like monster suddenly jumping out of the grand flames. The mane on its neck was dyed red by blood, and it opened its huge mouth and roared. The sound waves soared, and the entire valley echoed this terrifying cry. At the same time, its thick snake tail whipped left and right behind it. The houses and houses of the villagers were beaten to pieces. Without hesitation, Hephaestus turned into a meteor and shot down the mountain. God, save us! Save us! In a burning village. A woman with a baby in her arms cries out in despair. She did not continue to flee, and her husband and son died at the hands of the chimera. One of her legs was also severely injured and she could no longer run. The villagers were frightened and ran away desperately. No one would come to rescue her. At this moment, she can only pray to the gods for help. Ho 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 ho! After the chimera roared with all his might, he opened his mouth and spit flames at the women and villagers in front of him. Spit out a terrible flame that can burn everything. However, when the sea of flames poured over, Chimera didn't hear the screams, and narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Your fire can't kill people. Let me teach you how to use fire. The flames subsided. A figure in a cloak appeared. He took off his hood, revealing a handsome and young face. Many villagers were shocked when they saw this scene. They've never seen anyone survive the flames of a chimera. Especially the mother and daughter, kneeling on the ground, staring blankly at the tall and straight figure in front of them. The Warcraft chimera on the opposite side was also slightly surprised, staring at the blonde boy with a pair of ferocious lion eyes, and let out a terrifying voice from the depths of his throat. Who are you? This question is too bad. A scarlet flame rose from the palm of Hephaestus, but I can still answer you, I am the future. With a big wave of his hand, the scarlet flame in his palm immediately turned into a slender filament of fire and swept over. Roar! Chimera instinctively sensed the danger, roared, and jumped back. The long fire wire was extremely fast and flexible like a swimming snake, winding its entire huge body in an instant. Vulcan. Hephaestus spat out the last two words in a low voice, and shook his hand hard. Puff chi chi. The scarlet flames immediately converged, cutting into Chimera's flesh. Chimera's huge physical body was shocked, quickly torn apart, collapsed, and the hot blood rushed wildly. A ferocious and violent beast was dismembered to pieces like this. If it weren't for the usefulness of keeping its corpse, Hephaestus could have burned the chimera to ashes with a single fire. As a high god, he is still very powerful in manipulating Vulcan, at least dozens of times more powerful than this monster. Roar! The lion's eyes the size of a chimera's brass bell or bloodshot. Staring incredulously at the blonde boy in front of him, he seemed unable to accept the fact that he was killed, until the last ray of brilliance slowly disappeared. As far as Hephaestus knew, the chimera guy ended up being the grandson of Sisyphus. A hero named Bellerophon shot him. But now it died at his hands. The magic core, the chimera's magic core. Hephaestus walked up to the corpse of the monster. One foot stepped on the ferocious animal's skull, cut the hard skull with flames, and looked for the magic core. After the initial panic, many villagers gathered behind Hephaestus and bowed down, shouting to the gods. Thanks to the great god for killing the chimera. Saving our lives. Thanks. A trembling old village chief was helped to walk to Hephaestus's side, looking in awe. They all heard what Hephaestus said just now. Vulcan. Standing in front of them is Vulcan. Found it. Hephaestus rummaged for a while, and found a fiery red crystal in the skull. It contains full of magic power and is full of restlessness. This is the power of fire. The most critical material for the artifact is available. Hephaestus held up the magic core and wiped away the blood with his cloak. Then, he turned his head and asked the old village chief, "Find me a place, I want to do something serious." The old village chief was astonished when he heard this. Most of Gelong village was burned down. But several houses were not completely destroyed. Hephaestus works here. He first melted his own gold belt, then took a piece of chimera's leg bone, polished it smooth, and used gold to create a handle for the bone. Next, he used the dagger to carve Vulcan runes on the leg bones. The Vulcan rune has the same attributes as the chimera core, which can enhance its power. Half an hour later, Hephaestus blew away the bone and ashes on the leg bone in one breath, revealing dense mysterious runes. Hephaestus then cut open the joint at the other end, and inserted the chimera's magic core into it. In this way, a staff is manufactured. Hephaestus felt a warmth in his hand. With a thought, a blazing flame erupted from the top of the staff. Manufacturing success. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host for successfully creating the lower artifact. The system rewards the divine spell, Sun God Fire. The long-lost system sounded. Hephaestus was content. It is very worthwhile to create an offensive low-grade artifact and get a magic spell. Sun God Fire, it sounds more powerful than Fire God Art. Hephaestus immediately learned this magic. After closing his eyes for a moment, he raised his palm. A flame rose in the palm of his hand. This flame is different from the past, it is a mysterious golden color. The temperature is extremely high. The temperature in the whole village increased a lot in an instant, which surprised Hephaestus slightly. This is the flame that can really burn everything. Hephaestus marveled. His Vulcan technique is more suitable for forging, but his aggressiveness is a bit worse. But this Sun Divine Fire is definitely his #1 divine art. There's something wrong here. The chimera's head can be taken back for a reward. Hephaestus put his staff and sword on his back, put his cloak on his body, and planned to pack up and leave. At this time, two people walked in outside. One is an old village chief with gray hair, and the other is a beautiful woman. Master Vulcan, this is our wish. Please accept it. The old village chief said tremblingly, with a hint of shame in his eyes. The beautiful woman beside him immediately took out a basket, which contained some pitifully few coins and some fresh fruits. She was a little embarrassed. The god in front of him saved the lives of a whole village of them. They are so poor that they can only pay so little. Hephaestus looked at them, reached in, picked up a green apple, took a big bite, and said, "Please help me find another rope. It is used to tie the chimera's head." The old village head and the woman were startled, and then showed indescribable gratitude. Hephaestus, breath, stop here. The edge of the valley cliff. The eyes of the river god Icrueus are like a torch, shining on the villages below the mountain. The place has just been ravaged by fire and is deserted. Villagers, men, women and children, are busy rebuilding their homes. At least build a shelter before the night when the beasts are raging. Icarus watched cautiously for a moment, his eyes flashing coldly. All the way from the ocean to the mainland kingdom, this little beast has been alone all the time. It seems that the sea goddess really didn't protect him in secret. Followed all the way so far. On the way, the river god also thought about doing something. But because he was afraid of Thetis' secret protection, he endured it. Up to now, the god of the river has been completely sure that Hephaestus is really alone and came to the mainland to make a living. His chance for revenge has come. Icrueus sneered grimly. A gust of wind swept past, and his figure had disappeared. Chi 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 chi. Hephaestus tied the bag tightly with rough rope. The ropes rubbed against each other, making a tooth-piercing sound. Inside this cloth bag, which is twice as big as him, is the head of the Warcraft chimera. The cloth bags were temporarily sewn by the villagers together. They had nothing but to repay Hephaestus in this way. Packing is done, let's go. Hephaestus carried the heavy sack on his back. Big drops of blood kept oozing out of the cloth bag, dripping on the ground, covered in dust. Congratulations to Vulcan. Congratulations to Vulcan. At this time, the gathered hundreds of villagers stood neatly, bowing and saluting, their eyes filled with awe. Even if it's just the chimera's head, there aren't many grown men, so don't even think about moving it. And the young man in front of them easily memorized it. This is the gods. By now. Hephaestus nodded at the villagers, and flew 3 feet into the air, ready to fly away. But at this moment, boom, a huge water column pierced through the heads of the villagers. The target is the flying Hephaestus. Hephaestus' eyes froze. He sensed a familiar aura from this water column. But at a critical moment, there is no time to think about it. Hephaestus activated the flying magic, and his whole body flew into the air like an arrow from the string. This water column missed a single hit, and all of them fell through the air. After hovering around the ground like a snake, it immediately stood upright, and there was a figure standing on it. Tall and burly, with a ferocious face, he is the river god Icrueus. It really is him, the river god Icrueus. When Hephaestus saw this man, he was filled with murderous intent. Unexpectedly, after passing through the temple of justice, this person has not given up revenge. This time it was a direct and shameless sneak attack. If he had reacted slower, he would have been hit by the water column and seriously injured. Stupid little. Where do you want to run? Ekrauf looked up, his eyes stabbed at the blond boy, and he grinned ferociously. He raised his hands, as if calling for something. In the next moment, the sound of rumbling water and turbulent water appeared in all directions. Vast water flows gathered from the sky in all directions, completely surrounding the valley. River, river god. The villagers were shocked when they saw this scene. Seeing two gods in one day was completely unexpected for them. Ekris, do you know what you are doing? Kill me, and you won't be able to escape the trial. Seeing this scene, Hephaestus didn't panic, but asked with a sneer. He had a strong killing intent in his heart, but he didn't show it. HMPH, I killed you here, who would know? Ekris relishes the feeling of being in control. There was no rush to do it. And he didn't intend to kill Hephaestus outright. He will use 10,000 cruel and vicious punishments. Slowly torture it to death. Only then can he unleash his vengeful anger that has been burning for more than a year. Well, I never imagined that you would be able to do this for a siren full of evil. In that case, I'll send you to the underworld to accompany her. Hephaestus heard this answer, his eyes turned cold, and his blonde hair danced wildly. His substantial killing intent permeated the air, and the surrounding villagers felt that they had come to the underworld, and at the same time trembled in fear. In the battle between the two gods, no matter who wins, they probably won't survive. I can hide from the chimera, but I can't escape the battle of the gods. I'm dead. Sharp-toothed little fool, how dare you mention the siren's name? Ekrois seemed to be blown away by a single sentence, with veins showing on his forehead, and he roared, "Go to hell." Rumble. The sky filled with water condensed into countless pythons. Bite to the Hephaestus in the sky. Act recklessly. A magical golden flame rises from the palm of Hephaestus. This is the sun god fire. Not to mention these pitiful rivers, even fighting in the sea, the power is still the same. Burn everything. Destroy. The flame in Hephaestus' palm suddenly turned into a sea of flames, sweeping in all directions. I saw that these rivers burned as soon as they came into contact with it. Hephaestus manipulated these flames, and together they slew towards Ekruis on the ground. Do not. How can that be? Ekruis' smug smile suddenly froze, his face full of shock. What fire can burn a river? Could it be the legendary sun god fire? But how could Hephaestus master the sun fire? Ekruis' mind was in a mess, his body trembled involuntarily, and he hurriedly looked around, only to find that the sky was full of sun fire. He had nowhere to escape. Ekruis found himself with no way out. Can't help falling into despair. Hephaestus hides too deep. Not only mastered the real fire of the sun, it can be released to such an extent. If it has not reached the realm of the upper god, it is impossible to have so much divine power to support the real fire of the sun. He's also a high god. Ekrois grew more and more frightened. The distance from the real fire of the sun is getting closer and closer, and his skin has begun to dry and crack. Thinking of the fate of being burned by the fire, Ekrois' scalp went numb, and he knelt down on the ground and shouted. Forgive me, great Hephaestus. I am delusional. I am blind. I should not have fought against you. Please spare me. After he shouted, he closed his eyes tightly in fear, trembling violently. Gradually, he felt the terrifying temperature around him subside. That is to say, Hephaestus put away the real fire of the sun. Did he let me go? Ekrois was a little happy in his heart. But not entirely sure. He raised his head slightly and opened his eyes to look. Call out. Laugh. Just at this time, the icy cold wind is coming. A sharp blade was reflected in the pupils of Ekros like lightning. The sharp blade pierced down fiercely, directly piercing his head. The whole field was dead silent. A drop of bright red blood flowed from his forehead to his cheek. Ekrois stared blankly, dazed. It's a pity to burn to ashes. Anyway, he is a high god who keeps a corpse and can make artifacts. The blond boy smiled brightly. Pull out the long sword head Ekruis from the head, and bring up a cluster of warm blood that splatters. The corpse fell to the ground limply, with a feeling of death. Many villagers were trembling, and the crows fell to their knees. They thought they would definitely die in this battle of gods. Unexpectedly, the Vulcan boy killed the river god neatly. They were safe and sound. Hephaestus wiped the blood off the iron sword with his cloak and inserted it into the scabbard. Then he threw the heavy chimera head in the cloth bag behind his back to the ground. There are materials for making artifacts, and there are ready-made places. He intends to take this opportunity to create another artifact. It was the first time he had obtained the corpse of the high god. Hephaestus picked up the body of the river god and walked towards the dilapidated wooden house. Many villagers looked at each other in blank dismay, and it took a long time before they dared to move. Hephaestus first cremated the body of Icrueus. It is the Vulcan technique. If the real fire of the sun is used, then the entire body will be burnt without leaving any slag. Not long, the flesh and blood evaporated, and a pure white skeleton appeared in front of Hephaestus. The scarlet flame continued to burn. The skeleton was gradually melted into a lump of white liquid. Poured on the mold, Hephaestus waits quietly, allowing itself to condense. About half an hour passed. After several processes by Hephaestus, a forest white bone sword was successfully forged. On the surface, this bone sword is not sharp, but it contains a huge wave of divine power inside. Obviously it is also a very powerful artifact. Made from the bones of the river god. Just call it river god sword. Hephaestus inspected it and said with satisfaction. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host for successfully creating the high-level artifact. The system rewards clergy, river. 300 years of divine power. The system's iconic icy mechanical sound arrives. Hephaestus, eyes lit up. He actually got a priesthood. This surprised him. Hephaestus opens the system panel, obtains the priesthood, and clicks on the divine power. The whole person was immediately bathed in the ocean of divine power. Moreover, he seemed to have an indescribable feeling for the water flow, and could faintly feel the surging water flow in all directions. Moments passed. Hephaestus opened his bright eyes and opened the system panel again. Host, Hephaestus. Race, Greek Protos. Bloodline level, Lord God 9th rank. Strength level, Higher God level 5. Portfolio, Craftsmen, river. Items, Siren bone flute, fire staff, river god sword. The strength has been raised to the 5th level of the upper god. Owning the priesthood of the river should allow me to freely manipulate the flow of water. Hephaestus guessed and experimented. He sensed the rush of water underground, so he manipulated it with a thought. After a few breaths, clusters of water emerged from the ground and hovered over his hands. Hephaestus manipulated the ball of water to wash his hands, and then threw it into the distance like a cannonball, making a dull bang. Water bomb attack. Hephaestus found it amusing. But he didn't continue playing. Time to pack up and leave. Hephaestus has gained a lot this trip. Killing the chimera, destroying one's enemies, and improving one's strength, obtaining the true fire of the sun and a priesthood, can be called an unprecedented harvest, and it is getting closer and closer to the strength of an adult. Hephaestus breathed a sigh of relief, contented, carried the river god sword on his back, and walked out of the cabin. Let's go. Back to the Libyan capital. Capital of Libya. At the city gate, Samu, the kingdom official who posted the reward list, was sitting on a wooden bench, shaking his fan, waiting anxiously, dripping with sweat. From receiving the bounty and leaving the capital to Gelong village in the east, it took at least 3 days to go back and forth. In other words, the mysterious blonde boy who accepted the reward would not come back until at least 3 days later. But Samu was still very anxious, inexplicably anxious. He felt that he shouldn't let a beautiful blonde boy take away the reward so easily. Samu even felt guilty. How could such a young man be able to defeat the vicious chimera? Isn't this going to die in vain? This is. A huge shadow looms over. Samu froze, looked up, and saw a man in a cloak standing in front of him. There was a huge cloth bag on its back, exuding a sweet and greasy smell of blood. After spotting the handsome face under the cloak, Sam stood up abruptly and called out, You. He recognized it. This is the blonde boy who received the reward. Yes, as you can see, I'm back. Hephaestus raised his head, revealing his face completely, his eyes bright and his smile wide. Then, he unloaded the heavy cloth bag on his back, stirring up a cloud of dust on the ground. Then, under the astonishment of the official Samu and the curious gazes of the surrounding citizens, Hephaestus untied the rope and untied the cloth bag. Wow! Cloth bag faded. A ferocious and bloody beast head appeared. The faces of the surrounding citizens turned pale with fright, and they took a few steps back. Samu's eyes widened, and he shouted in disbelief, "Chimera! This is the head of Chimera. You really killed Chimera. Of course, an ordinary lion's head shouldn't be this big, right?" Hephaestus laughed. "It's really a chimera. Everyone, come and see. A hero killed the Warcraft chimera. It's scary. How on earth is this done? This must be the power of the gods. This monster is finally dead. My village was destroyed by it. Benefactor. This is a great benefactor." The citizens found that the monster was dead, and they all came to watch boldly, and were extremely curious about Hephaestus. Some refugees who had encountered the chimera expressed gratitude to Hephaestus. "Quick, go and inform the king." Samu ordered a small follower around him. The little entourage quickly squeezed through the crowd to notify, and shouted, "Chimera is dead. The hero killed Chimera," causing riots in every street. Samu then walked up to Hephaestus and said excitedly, "Hero, you are the hero of the Libyan people. Please come with me. The king will definitely reward you heavily." Hephaestus shrugged casually. He doesn't really care about rewards. The human king's reward cannot be more precious than his fire staff and river sword. But since he came to the world to travel, it would be better to go with the flow. Anyway, he has nothing else to do now. Soon, under the arrangement of Officer Samu, the gigantic head of the chimera was placed on a large table. Under the wooden table, there are two thick long logs tied. 4 strong and tall Libyan soldiers carried the wood on their shoulders and carried it to the palace. Officials Samu and Hephaestus walked ahead of them, surrounded by a crowd of Libyan soldiers and citizens, cheering loudly as they passed. The citizens of the Libyan capital followed closely, almost creating a scene of empty streets, and many citizens, holding out a lot of food and coins, handed them to Hephaestus in the center. But Hephaestus didn't answer either. He is God and does not need these. Because of the fiery enthusiasm of the citizens, Hephaestus and the others moved extremely slowly. On several occasions, Hephaestus even wanted to fly directly to the palace, where he would no longer be crowded with people. Samu didn't notice Hephaestus' expression at all, and said sincerely from the side, "You deserve their cheers and gifts. Hero, you saved them. It's true. Every time Chimera shows up, it's closer to the capital, so go down, it will come to the capital sooner or later, you stopped it." Hephaestus scratched his head. This is a bit exaggerated. But it's about the same. It is difficult for mortals to pose a threat to the chimera. If this monster really descends on the capital, then they can only close the city gates and hide. It took a long time for the procession to reach the palace. The building of the king's palace stands tall and majestic, many times stronger than those low houses in the city-state. But the sea god palace and the justice temple that Hephaestus has seen are all insignificant. At the gate of the palace, hundreds of Libyan soldiers stopped the citizens from advancing. This allowed Hephaestus and the others to march smoothly. The king has prepared a banquet to thank the hero. Please the hero come with me. At this time, an old official came to greet him with a smile on his face. Immediately afterwards, Hephaestus and Samu turned left and right through the long corridor and came to the largest palace. There are 2 huge doors here. Crunch, crunch. After several people arrived, the 2 soldiers guarding the gate immediately pushed open the heavy gate. Hephaestus immediately saw what was inside. A group of musicians played music, and a group of beauties accompanied the dance. The maids of the palace hold a variety of fresh fruits and hold a big feast. Many kingdom officials gathered and chatted in groups of 3 or 4, and exchanged cups and cups. There were also some young warriors, all tall and mighty, very eye-catching. Of course, the most conspicuous thing is the middle-aged man sitting on the high throne. He wears a crown on his head, and his square face is very majestic and serious. But at this moment, he seemed to see something, and there were smile lines on his face, and he stood up from the throne. Hephaestus looked at him, and Samu reminded him, "This is the king of Libya, Lysias." Hephaestus nodded. "Everyone. The heroes of our kingdom of Libya are back." King Lysias stood up, and shouted with laughter. Everyone in the palace looked at the door together. Saw Hephaestus in his cloak, and behind them, the gigantic head of a chimera. Everyone exclaimed. Reaction was much larger than Libyan nationals. After all, most of them have no horror experience, and have never seen Warcraft at all. "King, your bounty order was accepted by this young hero. He fought bravely with the Warcraft chimera, and finally killed the chimera." Official Samu stepped forward and reported respectfully. All stare at Hephaestus. Although a little unbelievable, the bright red blood on the boy's cloak seemed to be a credible proof. "Good, young hero. Well done." King Lysias smiled happily, skipped the crowd, and strode directly to Hephaestus. "I thank you for all the people of Libya. Hero, you saved them. As the king, I also want to thank you." "You are welcome, king. Human beings should watch and help each other." Hephaestus nodded. He didn't want to reveal his identity as a god for now. Hephaestus took off the hood of his cloak, revealing a chiseled handsome face and blonde hair. "This is a rare handsome man. It can rival the most handsome gods on Mount Olympus." At this moment, everyone was amazed from the bottom of their hearts. The court ladies even stared straight at the eyes. Even King Lysias lost his mind for a moment. But he quickly regained his composure and joked, "Hero, your appearance will make all the women in Libya go crazy for you. By the way, hero, what is your name? Please tell me." "Hephaestus." Hephaestus replied as such, feeling a little uncomfortable with the gazes of these people around him. He was starting to regret taking off his cloak a little. But he was also uncomfortable with hiding his head and showing his tail all the time. "Okay, Hephaestus. This banquet is just for you. Let's have a good time." King Lysias laughed loudly, waved his hands to let the soldiers put down the chimera's head, and then said to the people around, "Play music and dance. For our hero, Hephaestus. Hephaestus. Hephaestus." All raised their glasses, cheered together, and shouted the name of Hephaestus. This huge sound wave shook the entire palace. Feeling their enthusiasm, Hephaestus also smiled slightly, took the drink offered by a maid, and drank it all in one gulp. Suddenly, he noticed something strange and looked in a certain direction. "I saw a beautiful and enchanting woman staring at him. Her eyes were like silk, and her eyes were flowing. Half of the whole person is hidden behind the pillars, which seems to be half hidden with a pippa. But it can still be seen from this half that the clothes on her body are very gorgeous, which is different from the court maids following behind. Moreover, on the snow-white arms and neck, there are large and small strings of precious jewels, which shows that the status is noble. This is our queen of Libya, Lamia." Samu, who was next to him, also noticed this scene, and introduced to Hephaestus in a low voice. "Lamia." Hephaestus felt that the name sounded familiar. "But I don't know where I've heard it." Lamia came out from behind the colonnade and smiled flatteringly at him. "Leading the pack," Hephaestus thought to himself, nodding at the end of the point, but he wasn't looking at the other party. The banquet was quickly set up. Mostly fruit, nothing special. Hephaestus sat on the most honorable seat besides the king and queen. He was very interested in these fruits and ate them with great pleasure. During the dinner, several officials and nobles came to ask curiously how he killed the chimera. One after another, Hephaestus, who asked, was a little impatient. Seeing him frowning, everyone didn't dare to ask any more questions, and sat back in their seats wisely. "Hephaestus, you are our Libyan hero, let me toast you a glass of wine." "Okay." Queen Lamia, who is as beautiful as a god, came to Hephaestus in style, holding a wine glass in her hand to toast. Hephaestus hesitated for a moment, then raised his glass and clinked glasses with Lamia. Lamia showed a seductive smile, and the back of her white and tender hand brushed against Hephaestus' finger intentionally or unintentionally, as if implying something. Hephaestus withdrew his hand as if stung by a scorpion. His face changed slightly. If it was just a wink, Hephaestus might not be thinking about it. But it's also too obvious. This queen is obviously seducing him. What's wrong, my hero? Seeing his strange behavior, Lamia took a few steps closer and asked with concern. Nothing. Hephaestus calmed down a bit, and said indifferently, I drank too much fruit wine today, and I can't drink any more. Please return the queen. Seduce him or not. Hephaestus is not interested in women like Lamia. Dare to seduce a man in front of the king, it is too wanton and indulgent. When Lamia heard these cold words, Mei Xiao froze immediately. She thought that with her unparalleled beauty, she could take down this boy, but she didn't expect to meet a cold nail here. Lamia felt a little angry in her heart. Seeing that Hephaestus ignored her, he picked up his glass and returned to his seat. Because the banquet was very lively, everyone was talking about their own things, and no one cared about the conversation between the queen and Hephaestus. There were only a few maids who seemed to realize that the queen was very interested in this heroic boy, but how dare they speak out? How dare you refuse me? You'll pay for it, I promise. Hephaestus. Lamia drank the fruit wine in one gulp, and the more she thought about it, the more angry she became, and she looked at Hephaestus with resentment. Beautiful queen, can I invite you to have a drink together? At this moment, another voice sounded beside him. Lamia turned her head and saw a young nobleman approaching. He was also very handsome, tall and mighty, as if he was a brave warrior. Of course, young nobleman. A cunning flashed across Lamia's eyes, and she immediately smiled and picked up her wine glass. What's your name? Young nobleman. Lamia took a sip of her drink, her eyes ambiguous. Nox. The eyes of the young nobleman gleamed greedily, scanning down from the queen's face all the way. Beautiful queen, my name is Nox. Nox, I love that name. Lamia gave a charming, and licked the wine juice from the corner of her mouth with her bright red tongue. Perhaps the queen may like something else. Nox said with a smile. This scene where Nox talks to the queen happened to be seen by Hephaestus, because he sensed an extraordinary force. And the source of this strength comes from that tall brown-haired youth. Who is that? Hephaestus focused his eyes on Nox. He found that there was divine power hidden in this person's body, and it also contained the power of thunder. Obviously he was not a mortal. How did the gods of Mount Olympus come to this banquet? And even went to talk to the queen. Hephaestus found that the brunette boy and the queen had a very happy conversation. The two were chatting and laughing, the scene was extremely harmonious, and they were quite intimate, whispering seemed to be talking about some private topic. Thunder, is this man Zeus the stallion? Hephaestus calculated, frowning. With the supernatural power of thunder, and going down to seduce mortal beauties, he can only think of Zeus, the king of the gods. After all, this guy is too stud. Suddenly, Hephaestus noticed that the queen and the young man looked at him together. The brown-haired boy's eyes were somewhat provocative. This look confused Hephaestus. Did he offend this little boy? To look at him like this? No, don't go, Nox. He's the one who killed the chimera. You're no match for him. I don't want to see you hurt. Don't go for my sake, okay? Lamia lowered her voice, a little pleading. No, he has insulted you, fair queen, and I cannot bear that. Nox said righteously. Trust me, queen, don't underestimate me, I will defeat him and make him apologize to you obediently. This, are you sure? Lamia looked embarrassed. In fact, she was secretly happy in her heart. This young nobleman named Nox was provoked by her in a few words. He is really a simple-minded fool. But he has a strong body and might have a few brushes. Actually, Lamia doesn't quite believe that Hephaestus killed the chimera. Just take this opportunity to give Hephaestus a try. If this blonde kid is a strong outsider, just imprison him and cook it well. Thinking of this, a burst of tingling pleasure surged through Lamia's heart. It doesn't matter, queen, you can watch how he was defeated by me with peace of mind. Nox smiled charmingly, turned and walked down the stairs. He made his way through the crowd and came straight to Hephaestus' table. Our great hero, Hephaestus, I heard that you killed the Warcraft chimera. Nox spoke condescendingly. At the same time, he secretly gave the queen a flattering look. His roar was so loud that everyone around him was attracted to him. Hephaestus probably understood what was going on by now. He put a grape into his mouth calmly. Isn't this obvious? Then, your strength must be strong. I want to compete with you, please fight. Nox got a satisfactory answer and continued. Looking at Hephaestus's expression, there was unconcealable contempt. Hephaestus was not surprised to hear this, he showed a helpless smile and looked at the queen. This woman is really not a fuel-efficient lamp. It was only a little longer, and I found a trouble and threw it over. Didn't he just reject her love proposal? At this time, King Lysias said, Nox, Hephaestus is the warrior who slayed the chimera. You are not the opponent, stand down. Don't make trouble at the banquet. King, everyone wants to see the hero's skill. However, Queen Lamia smiled charmingly and said, you can satisfy our curiosity. Besides, it would be good for Nox to learn fighting skills from heroes. Hearing her persuasion, Lysias hesitated. Many ministers and nobles also chimed in. They are full of curiosity about Hephaestus. Still others believe that the chimera may not have been killed by Hephaestus after all. After all, this blonde boy doesn't look strong. Moreover, there was no scar on his body, his palms were smooth and tender, without any calluses, he didn't look like a warrior at all. Now that someone is challenging Hephaestus, they are all excited, so take this opportunity to touch the blonde boy's bottom. Lysias couldn't bear the queen's acting like a baby, or he also doubted Hephaestus in his heart, so he pondered and said. Of course it depends on the hero's own opinion. If you wish to enlighten me, then Nox should go to the temple to thank the gods on Mount Olympus. The ball ends up hitting Hephaestus. The crowd continued to stare at him. He didn't answer in a hurry, but slowly wiped his mouth and hands with a clean cloth, then stood up and said lightly. Then compare. He also wanted to know. Who is this person who provokes him for the sake of a woman? There was another burst of excited cheers in the palace. For most, this is an eye-opening opportunity. A battle between heroes and warriors. At the suggestion of King Lysias, the crowd moved from the palace to a large square. The sun was shining outside, and there was no cloud in the sky. Waves of heat blow over here, rolling up choking dust. Nox chose his weapon, a spear and a shield, and stood tall and straight in the center of the square. Hephaestus stood opposite him, his hands empty. But he has two swords crossed behind his back. One is an iron sword, and the other is a river god bone sword. In addition, there are siren bone flutes and flame staffs hanging around his waist, which are dazzling. In some people's eyes, he is more like a busking performer. The siren, the river god, and the chimera have all been forged into weapons by you. You little devil is not easy. Nox looked at his opponent and said jokingly in a low voice. When talking to Hephaestus, his aura is completely different. There is a kind of arrogance that despises everything, as if he doesn't pay attention to anyone. Supercilious. You are indeed a god. Only a god can recognize these things. So, what kind of god are you? Hephaestus looked calmly, drew out his iron sword, and pointed the tip of the sword at the tall young man opposite him. The opponent was a full head taller than him. He is still a teenager after all. Want to know? Let's talk after defeating me first. Just to remind you, don't use all your strength, just use the iron sword, you will definitely lose. Nox sneered, his aura rising steadily. It no longer feels like an aristocratic warrior. But the great gods of Olympus. I also want to remind you, if you are so arrogant in a duel with me, you might die. Hephaestus didn't even bother to sneer. Humph. Nox's expression froze, his eyes became sharper, and his figure disappeared in a whoosh. The people watching the battle couldn't see his movements clearly, and all of them stared wide-eyed. When Hephaestus suddenly turned around and slashed back with a sword. And a shield blocked the sword. The two collided and made a dull sound. Nox has come behind Hephaestus without knowing when. Ooh, this confrontation made everyone exclaim. The two moved so fast that ordinary people couldn't see clearly. How did they achieve this speed? So strong, King Lysias murmured in surprise. It's really strong. Lamia was a little proud after being surprised. These two handsome and powerful men fought because of her no matter what. This is her charm. This is her method. Just a moment when everyone was talking. The sound of bang bang dang dang in the center of the square has been heard intensively. Stir-fried beans are average. And the figures of the two people almost turned into afterimages, and in the eyes of everyone, they were just a blur. Wherever the two of them passed by, the sky was filled with dust and sand. The ground is also cracked with dense cracks. Can't bear the strength of the two. Is this kid so strong? Nox waved his spear and shield, frowning involuntarily. He originally thought that 5 breaths would be able to take down the opponent. I didn't expect to be entangled for so long. The opponent's strength exceeded his expectations. Do you still want to hide your strength? A piece of advice. Don't use the power of thunder. You will have no chance. Nox was completely overwhelmed by the might of Hephaestus. When an iron sword strikes down, it needs a spear and a shield to resist it together. If you want to die, I will fulfill you. When Nox heard this, his expression darkened. The eyes suddenly shot out 2 groups of intense blue light of thunder and lightning. Rumble. A group of extremely violent and huge thunder exploded in the center of the square. The destructive force shook the entire palace violently. Everyone was stunned by this blow, all dumbfounded. Nox retreated dozens of steps, and found that there was a deep hole in the original ground, but there was no enemy's bones, and his brows were immediately furrowed. Although you have the strength of a high god. But it's not my opponent yet. Suddenly, a clear voice came from above the head. Nox looked up with everyone in Libya. I saw the blonde boy Hephaestus standing in midair, with golden flames surging behind him. The light like the sun is extremely dazzling. Do not look directly. Gods on Mount Olympus. At this moment, the hearts of Li Shus, Lamia and others were beating wildly. They saw the gods. Sun god fire. Nox recognized the golden flame, his eyes were gloomy, and he couldn't help taking a step back with his right foot. Before he could do anything else, the golden flames had already swept over. The figure of Hephaestus is hidden in it. Rumble. Destroy. The shield and spear in Nox's hand turned into dust, and 2 terrifying blue thunder pillars appeared instead, constantly bombarding the golden flames. But to no avail, he couldn't stop the golden flame from approaching. 2 gods are fighting. What the hell is going on here? My god. Many nearly passed out. Who gave you the sunfire? Hephaestus. You'd better get on your knees and confess to me. Otherwise, I will definitely punish you. Kill you. The stubborn Nox shouted angrily. His divine power was consumed extremely quickly, almost exhausted. The power of thunder and lightning naturally weakened accordingly. At this time, a figure flashed out of the sunfire, broke through the thunder and lightning directly, and came to Nox. Puff Kai. A small voice sounded. Nox's face flushed suddenly, his eyes returned to normal, and the lightning in his hand quickly dissipated. Senbai's bone sword had pierced his chest. I hate people threatening me the most. Hephaestus' gaze was terribly cold. You have no idea who you've offended. Hephaestus, you are so naive. You will, for this, pay for it. Nox's eyes were horrifying, and he opened his purple lips tremblingly, and blood flowed from his mouth immediately. He finished the speech word by word. Hephaestus resolutely drew out the river god sword. Blood splattered, and Nox also collapsed to the ground, completely dead. In a moment, the entire sky was covered with dark clouds, thunder and lightning. A doomsday scene. Zeus. Hephaestus spit out 2 words, looked up at the sky, his gaze was still cold. It was indeed Zeus that Hephaestus killed. However, this doomsday scene of thunder dancing was not brought by Zeus, but Hera. She is the queen of the gods and enjoys the same majesty as Zeus. On Mount Olympus, Hera, queen of the gods, sat on the golden throne and glared at the mortal Libyan palace. You stupid! How dare you challenge Zeus to a duel with Hephaestus? Hera has always had a way of catching rape. Even though Zeus tried every means to create a clone to sneak down to earth, he still couldn't escape Hera's eyes. She had long noticed that Zeus and Lamia were flirting, and witnessed the whole process from beginning to end. A human woman actually seduced her husband and son at the same time. He also challenged the 2 of them to a duel. How could Hera tolerate this kind of thing, and she became furious on the spot. The whole sky is full of thunder and lightning. That was the manifestation of her anger. Lamia, since you are proud of your beauty, then I will destroy your beauty. Let you become a disgusting monster from now on. I will make you ugly from god to human, and no one will look at you anymore. One look. Hera's voice echoed in the shrine. A vicious curse, cast like this. Libya, royal palace. The sky was covered with thunderclouds, which was very frightening. Many humans on the ground, from the king to the servants, all knelt on the ground in fear and prayed to the gods. Pray the gods don't kill them. Even the instigator, Lamia, was trembling with fright. She never expected that she played with people's hearts, and actually played with two gods. Now the gods are angry, what should we do? What should I do? Lamia's anxious hands and feet were cold, and her heart was on fire. Lamia, Hephaestus murmured, looking at the queen whose body was almost limp. He finally remembered. He also knew this Lamia in his previous life. She is the queen of the kingdom of Libya in the world, and she is extremely beautiful. Because of the sneaky collude with Zeus, he was finally discovered and cursed by the queen Hera, and became a monster. Now, history appears to be repeating itself. Rumble. Suddenly, a thunderbolt descended from the sky, hit on Lamia's body. Everyone screamed in fright, and hurriedly hid away. In the blink of an eye, Lamia was the only one left here. Her face was distorted, her mouth was wide open, and she wanted to scream, but she couldn't scream, only the sound of, ho ho. She fell to the ground and her body twitched and rolled non-stop, her eyes turned white, as if she was falling ill. About 2 breaths passed. Lamia's body undergoes drastic changes. The legs of the lower body are united, the clothes are torn apart, and it becomes a thick snake tail covered with scales. Lamia's pupils also quickly turned into the vertical pupils unique to snakes. When she opened her mouth, her tongue became bright red and slender, with 2 forks at the top. After the painful mutation, Lamia also noticed something was wrong. Looking up at his lower body, he found his ugly snake tail covered with scales. Scared on the spot, he let out a shrill scream that didn't belong to humans, it was extremely ear-piercing. Everyone in the palace turned pale with horror and covered their ears in pain. Including King Lysias, this middle-aged man had lost his crown for a long time. His expression seemed to be crying and smiling, and his body was held up by 2 soldiers to barely stand. It seems that he was greatly stimulated, almost demented. Gods of Olympus, do not do this to me. Please, let me go. Lamia's hair was disheveled, screaming madly. The scaled snake tail whipped around, knocking several unlucky soldiers into the air. Monster! Monster! There was also a soldier who, out of fear, stabbed her tail with a spear before the tail was drawn. Blood splashed out. Lamia suffered from pain, screamed again and again, and quickly walked and fled lying on the ground, disappearing from everyone's sight. At this time, the thunderclouds in the sky gradually dispersed. Hera's anger faded. Everyone was still in shock, and stood there dumbfounded. Many court ladies were so frightened that they sobbed in a low voice, wiping away their tears. Hera, the empress of offending God, it is merciful not to kill you, she is the one who can even abandon her newborn son. However, such a punishment seems to be more painful than death. Hephaestus raised an eyebrow. Didn't pay much attention to this scene. No sympathy for that Lamia either. If he was an ordinary mortal hero or warrior, he might have been instigated by Lamia to instigate Zeus to kill him at this moment. This kind of person has nothing to sympathize with. Hephaestus took 2 steps closer, picked up the body of Nox, and left. Big beads of blood dripped from the wound and dragged all over the ground. If he guessed right, this body is the clone of Zeus. How precious is the avatar of the god king. Of course it cannot be discarded like this. Possess the strength of a high-level god, that is to say, at least one can refine a high-level artifact. When everyone present saw Hephaestus lift the corpse and leave, no one dared to say anything, their eyes were filled with awe. They probably also understood that this man was the god of fire on Mount Olympus. That's why he could kill Chimera so easily. The officials and nobles who had guessed wildly before were extremely terrified, for fear that their thoughts would be known by the gods and punished. Especially after seeing the whereabouts of the queen. In the palace, Hephaestus found a random room and closed the door tightly. Then release flames and burn Zeus' clone. Forged by divine fire, this body with the strength of a high god melted into a mass of liquid. Zeus masters the thunder. What kind of artifact should I build? At this moment, Hephaestus fell into deep thought. After careful consideration, Hephaestus decided to forge a Thor's hammer. He also happened to be short of an artifact-level hammer. When he left Ocean God Palace, he didn't bring his own hammer. Thinking of this, Hephaestus forged the mass of liquid in the shape of Thor's hammer, which he knew from his previous life. About an hour passed. The hammer body is completely formed. The faint blue light of thunder and lightning surrounds the whole body. Make a crackling sound. Very cool. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host for successfully forging high-rank artifact. The system rewards 200 years of divine power. Charm value plus 20. Holy title Thunder. Thunder priesthood. Hephaestus, eyes glowed. He killed the river god before, forged the river god sword, and got the priesthood of river. Now kill the clone of Zeus, forge Thor's hammer, and get the priesthood of thunder again. That is to say, if an item is forged with gods as raw materials, the system will reward the other party's priesthood. Hephaestus thought excitedly. At the same time, immediately learn the priesthood, and then all the divine power and charisma points are on the system panel. A few breaths passed. Hephaestus felt that the strength in his body was much more abundant. It seems that it is not far from breaking through the next small realm. Obtaining the priesthood of thunder, I feel more compatible with Thor's hammer. Use it. It must be powerful. Hephaestus swung the thunder hammer. Knowing the thunder power contained in it well, this is the benefit of controlling the priesthood. Right now. Boom. There was another rumble of thunder outside. When Hephaestus heard it, his eyes lit up, and his clairvoyance penetrated the house and looked into the sky. Immediately, I saw dark clouds billowing in the sky, thunder and lightning flashing. Just like Hera was angry just now, there was a sense of terror that the world was about to be destroyed. It seems that Zeus realized that his clone was killed. Hephaestus understood that this time Zeus was angry. Although it was a big harvest, it offended Zeus, the king of the gods. The threat of the dying Zeus clone is still vivid in his mind. Hephaestus felt a heavy sense of oppression and crisis. Must be promoted to the realm of the main god as soon as possible. Only in this way can we have the power to protect ourselves and compete with Zeus. No hesitation. Hephaestus pushed the door out, soared into the air, and flew into the distance. The human beings in the palace, including those in the capital of Libya, saw the terrifying celestial phenomena and a figure flying across the sky. They all thought that a god had descended into the world, and knelt down together to pray to the gods they believed in fear. Mount Olympus. In the palace of the king of the gods. Zeus was indeed furious. Hephaestus. Hera, you have produced a good son. Zeus's beard trembled wildly, and it was difficult to calm down for a long time. With great difficulty, he managed to create a doppelganger, and went down to the world for entertainment. The result was completely destroyed by Hephaestus and Hera. One is to kill his clone. One is to turn a beauty into a half-human, half-snake monster. This pair of mother and son is perfect. Bad luck. Bad luck. The moment Zeus cursed, he expressed his depression, and slowly, after a long time, he calmed down. When Zeus calmed down, he thought carefully again. Think about everything that just happened. As for the god Queen Hera, he no longer wanted to bother with this terrible jealous woman. The main attention is on Hephaestus who killed his clone. Hephaestus, he was born about a year ago, right? He has grown to be a high god, and he has also mastered the sun fire. The potential is so great, if it lasts forever, let him continue to grow. Zeus squinted and blinked, as if interested in Hephaestus. If this is the case, then there is no need to offend such a powerful subordinate for a mortal woman. Wouldn't it be better to take Hephaestus under his own hands and strengthen his power? But the only trouble is that Hephaestus has such great potential and grows so fast. If it is too strong, it will breed ambition and get out of control. Even one day, when his strength reaches a certain level, his status as the king of the gods will be threatened. Zeus would never allow this to happen. When you have great strength, no matter whether you are a human or a god, you will not be able to control your own inflated desires. Hephaestus, where is your limit? Zeus stared into the distance. He stood up from the throne, a pair of eagle wings suddenly flapped, and a hurricane suddenly blew up in the shrine, and his whole body disappeared. The figure of Zeus descended from the sky. Bring a storm. He landed before a small temple on Mount Olympus. It seems to be agreed. A man also came out of it. The appearance of the man is quite kind, with a golden beard growing on his chin, wearing a loose and plain robe, and walking on the ground with bare feet. I have seen the king of the gods. The man with the golden beard bowed slightly respectfully. Prometheus, don't waste your time. I want you to prophesy something for me. Zeus waved his hand majestically and strode into the temple. Prometheus followed behind. After the two sat down in the temple, the servants of the elves served hot tea. Prometheus asked, "King Zeus, what do you want me to prophesy?" "Prophecy, the future of Hephaestus." Zeus was silent for a moment, and spoke. "Mount Olympus has many gods with the priesthood of prophecy. The most powerful of them is Prometheus. Prometheus was born of Themis, the goddess of justice, and Iapetos, the Titan. Although they belong to the Titan family, they submit to the gods of Mount Olympus. Zeus also held him in high esteem. Prometheus and Athena, the goddess of wisdom, co-created humans. Prometheus was responsible for sculpting the human shape, while Athena infused the clay figurine with soul and taught human knowledge. The future of Hephaestus. When Prometheus heard this name, his eyes seemed to brighten a little. Is that the son of Hera, queen of the gods? It's him. Zeus nodded. Prophecy for me immediately, I want to see how powerful he is in the future. Yes. Prometheus agreed very simply. Please like and subscribe my channel.